then we're going live on the face melt. Takes a minute to generate. And in the description, to your page, Veteran Section Council. And thank you for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the V.A.C. Roundtable number 24. It is September, so we are, of course, at the 20th anniversary of 9/11. We have special guests tonight, Diane Goldstein of Law Enforcement Action Partnership, and Peter Forcelli, who is a law enforcement specialist and a man known to many, both good, the bad, and the ugly. But we are very proud to have them tonight for this very special discussion. Of course, we are a week nearly removed from 9/11, but needless to say, it was a point in time that affected our lives exponentially. So I'm going to start with our first question and go directly to, we'll start off with Diane and then we'll go to Peter. Where were you and what were you doing when you saw and heard what happened?
I was the sergeant for our Special Investigations Unit, which was a multi-agency jurisdictional surveillance, narcotics kind of career criminal team. And I was getting ready for work and jumped out of the shower and had the news on. And as I'm, getting dressed, the towers came down. And I remember quickly gathering up all my gear, all my tactical gear and everything, making certain it was in my surveillance unit, because I knew it's like, who knows if I'm going to come home tonight or not. We'll see what happens. And I remember getting in my my ride and getting on the freeway and really thinking about the loss of life and how it was going to impact us, and knew intuitively that it was going to be good and bad in so many ways. It was going to be good relative to how it brought America together, how it brought law enforcement together, the fire services, around the attack. But I also knew intuitively that it was going to cause our country to change. I didn't know how, but in a way that would impact American civil liberties. And so it really was the birth of the surveillance state. And I'll deal and talk about that a little bit more once everyone has their thoughts. So, there was a lot of good things that came out of it. I wish we could get that spirit back of bipartisanship, in politics, and in people not being so polarized, and people supporting public safety. And so it's, I take it as a time of reflection. And I think it's really important for us to not ever forget, there's still people suffering from PTSD, civilians and sworn alike. There's so many deaths that have been caused by that. And I think for our country, we shouldn't forget the servicemen that went outside of our borders and sacrificed their lives to save, freedom and to protect us. And so, it's with great candor, I'm very, very conflicted about the legacy of 9/11. But I think we need to remember the people first and foremost.
Thank you for that, Diane. Needless to say, that was very beautiful and eloquent. I'd like to welcome Peter today to our group, and I know this is a touchy subject for you, Peter, because you lived that day. So please feel free to share your experience.
Sure. Yeah. When the North Tower was hit, I was actually on the FDR Drive in Manhattan, heading down towards the area around the North Tower, because I had an office at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Lower Manhattan, which is about a quarter mile from Ground Zero. And interestingly, the evening before September 11th, my wife and I had a bit of a falling out over finances. I had left the New York City Police Department. I was a cop there for 15 years, took a huge pay cut to come over to work for ATF. So, the bills became an issue. So the night before, there was no kiss goodnight. That morning, left the house, angry, got in the car, heading down the FDR Drive. I got a phone call from my boss. I was not too far from the Brooklyn Bridge, which is kind of close to Ground Zero, when he told me a plane hit the World Trade Center. Like most people, I thought, oh my God, like a Cessna, some small commuter plane or something hit the World Trade Center. Tourist had a heart attack flying a plane or something like that. Got to the scene shortly afterwards. I was there helping move people along when the second plane hit. When the second plane hit, I was about 15 to 20 feet away from a young female EMT, probably 25, a little younger, who was tending to a patient. Saw her stand there taking care of that patient 1 minute, turned around and looked back at her, and she was gone on the ground. Kept trying to keep people moving out of there. Went to look for some additional ATF people, saw 3 of my former NYPD colleagues walking into the plaza of Ground Zero right when the South Tower fell. I was right across the street, ran north, and barely escaped, actually hit under a fire truck for a few seconds. Some of the debris hit the truck. I got caught up in the dust cloud. The grit and the dust got in my eyes, couldn't see. The dust was so thick, I realized if I stay under this truck, I'm going to suffocate. So I climbed back out from under the truck and ran north on Church Street until I eventually ducked into a building that's now a Wolfgang Puck restaurant. Spent 3 days roughly. I came home on September 13th after spending many hours trying to dig for survivors that weren't there. They were all gone, or people got out. And when I came home on the morning of September 13th, saw my wife with my 2 children on the front steps of the house. They were getting ready to go to school. They were in their Catholic school uniforms. And it was when I got there, my wife, said she was going to take the kids to school. She came back, we had a discussion, and that's when I learned that while I was there digging and looking for folks and never had the presence of mind to think to call home, my wife sat home with my kids. She sent my mother-in-law to school to go pick them up and bring them home. And they sat there for days waiting for a chaplain to come and tell them that I was gone, which made me realize, how selfish and foolish I felt for never calling home, never checking in. So a lot of lessons learned on 9/11, saw a lot of bad things, but like Diane pointed out, when the towers fell, all of Lower Manhattan was covered in this very, very thick dust. I mean, very grainy dust. Like I said, it hurt my eyes when it got them. But we were all covered in this, so there were no black people. Everybody was gray. Everybody was this ashen gray. And we talk about September 12th, and I speak very fondly of that because it's an important mindset to remember how we all took care of each other. We all came together. But really, in the second half of September 11th, that's when it really started. There was horrible things going on. You could hear the firemen, personnel locators, hundreds of them chirping in the rubble. You saw people were walking out in mass, like people who were congregated in Lower Manhattan that escaped the towers but couldn't leave that area, just sullen, no speaking. Everybody's very quiet, like zombies almost. It's a very surreal thing to live through. But for all the bad things that we saw down there was incredible heroism, incredible humanity, and I think what gets me through my dark times, because I have PTSD. I survived some really bad bouts of survivor's guilt because I lost 7 friends on that day itself, and I'd lost friends in the line of duty before that, 4 good friends. But coping with 7 losses at one time was just incredibly difficult to deal with. And I'm not forgetful of the fact that, look, I lived through that. But veterans, there's folks that fight for our country who lose friends in battle, sometimes more than one, sometimes large groups. So this is not a unique experience that I'm going through, but it's important for people to talk about it and to realize that, look, bad things change you and you're not going to be the same after that, but that's okay. I think of the good things to help me get through those dark memories. And it's always best to live to fight another day. So find someone to talk to, extend a helping hand to someone who's down. Sometimes all it takes is to ask someone, hey, are you all right? And I think we need to do that more often. But I'm incredibly honored to sit here and talk to a bunch of veterans who served the country. Because again, when my friends were murdered, it was some brave men and women in uniform that took the fight back to the people who we believed hit us on that day. So I'm incredibly grateful to be here, and I'll always extend a helping hand to a veteran any chance I can. So, thanks.
Thank you, Peter. Needless to say, that is beyond humbling to hear for all of us. I'm going to go over to Council Member Ricardo Prieta. He was a GWAT veteran, and he was one of those, Peter, who responded to the call on that day.
Thank you, Etienne. Thank you for sharing your story, Pete, and for being here with us. I was a custom metal fabricator, high school dropout, when 9/11 went down. I woke up to a hangover trying to get to work. I was watching a friend of mine's house, and I woke up early and made it over across the street to my mom's and dad's house to get changed for work, jump in the shower. And as I went to the bathroom, I looked and I saw them in their room, and they were just fixed on the TV. And it was odd. They didn't even acknowledge me. So I walked in there, and we both just, or all three of us just sat there in my parents' room watching the coverage. And then I kind of snapped out of it after, I don't know how long, and got showered up, changed, went to work, and we listened to coverage, and the boss had the coverage on in the office all day. And there was just I can't describe the feeling. It was just, there was part that immediately was like, well, who has the balls to do this? And like, what is this? And but there was also just this deep dread and sorrow, this feeling of like, where are the people at? Where are the people at in those towers? Like, you know, and then you start to hear all the numbers of how many people per day it holds on an average business day. It's like, oh my God, what's going on, right? Like, how many people did we lose, and what's happening here? So made it through the day, and told my boss immediately after. I was like, I quit. And I was like, I gotta go. I'm gonna join the military. And he's just kind of like, what? I was like, yeah, I want to go join the military. And he just laughed at me, right? Because high school dropout. But yeah, that's what I was doing. That's where I was at. I'll hold off on the rest because it's pretty much related for the other questions, but I'll pass.
Thank you, Council Member. Going over to Council Member Pearson.
Thank you, Etienne. So I was in 11th grade electronics class with one of my favorite teachers, Mr. Clark, Council Rock High School in Newtown, Pennsylvania. I don't remember really feeling much. I think it was something that was so out of the norm. I mean, I guess I grew up in, very stable family, stable home, nothing outside of, family members, dying of old age or cancer or something like that. I don't think I've ever experienced anything in that, to that magnitude. The wildest thing, one of the only things I really remember, there's a few things I remember from that day, but my teacher knew, he called it. I had no idea who Osama bin Laden was, but I found out that day from my teacher, that Mr. Clark. This is between the hits, in between the hits of Tower 1 and Tower 2. And then just seeing one of my good friends walking out with her father when her mother's office was on a higher story of one of the towers, but luckily she was in like Illinois or something that day. So what it did do was solidify me going into the military. I don't think I would have been able to accomplish college at that point in my life, or even thinking about it. I was already set to go to the military. I think I might have been already enlisted into the Marine Corps. So thinking back on it, it could have been a excitement for revenge or something, which is a terrible thing for me to say now, but that's probably where I was and how I felt at that moment.
Thank you, sir. Council Member Buckley.
Thank you. So I was at the University of Massachusetts on 9/11. I was playing football and I lived with 4 of my teammates in our apartment. And I was the first one up. And I remember I turned on the TV and the one tower was smoking. And instantly I thought about 1993. And I was like, I didn't think 93 was like that bad. Like it was kind of weird to me. So I mean, I can remember all this. I got a bowl of Cheerios and I'm going to the couch to sit down. And I get a phone call from one of my buddies who's at the University of Michigan that we grew up together back in Pennsylvania. And he was just freaking out and I couldn't really understand what was going on. And I'm like, what is up? And he's like, listen, I can't get a hold of everyone. You think we're okay? And I'm like, again, I'm like, who are you trying to get a hold of? I don't understand this. And then, you know, sure enough, you see the second plane go in. And it was just like, what the heck? And he's like, dude, I think we're under attack or something crazy is going on. So obviously we all knew at that point, I mean, you know, probably the guy who was in the hottest chair in the world was probably President Bush sitting there in front of a bunch of elementary kids and, you know, people giving him the word what was going on. And then, you know, he gives his speech and you understood we were under attack at that point. So it was kind of just a bizarre day on the campus. Like some classes were just canceled. A couple were not. I showed up, you know, there was like 2 or 3 kids in there and they're just like, guys, I think today we just call a class. So I had football practice later that day and I drive down to the football complex and we have probably about like 12 or 13 guys were from the like New York City area. And obviously, you know, we all got to kind of date ourselves here. You know, cell phones weren't what they were then, what they are today. So everyone's using landlines. No one could really call home and understand like what was going on. And so I jump up on the trainer's table to get taped up and my nickname's Buck. And the one trainer's like, Buck, I don't think we're taping today. And I'm like, okay. So walked out in our locker room. We had like those brown cubby lockers and we had 3 big screen TVs. So we're sitting there just watching it and our coach walks in and, you know, he's talking a little bit about what's happening and, you know, hoping everyone's families are okay. Then he's like, hey, why don't we go outside and have a quick whiz practice, which means we just put a helmet on and more or less get our fit and do a quick hour-long practice. And it was just more for, you know, obviously for his mindset, and I agree with it, maybe get our minds off what was happening. But one of the captains stood right up and said, Coach, I don't think we should practice today. And he goes, that is fine. He's like, guys, go home, you know, call your loved ones if you can. He's like, obviously we kind of see how fragile life truly is. And the last thing he said to us, he goes, I doubt we're playing football this weekend because Pete Rozelle, who's the NFL commissioner during the time John F. Kennedy was assassinated, he said one of his biggest regrets was playing football that weekend. So we, you know, stopped by our local distributor, grabbed a couple cases of beer, and we rolled back to the house and had TV on. And, you know, typical things, guys were all talking, you know, kind of pissed off and figuring out what was happening. I got a phone call from back in Pennsylvania. One of my dear friends, his brother was missing at this point. He worked in the one tower and, you know, all I know was he got outside. Eric called him. His name was Noel Mayers. And he's like, Noel, what's going on? He's like, I'm not sure. I can't find my secretary. I'm going to go back in the building and go get her. And that's the last time anyone ever heard from him. And then, you know, as the news was going on, I remember they started showing the scenes of people throwing themselves out of the building. And I just remember there was a woman who jumped out, and, you know, even though it was just like a split second, she, you know, out and then she was down. I remember thinking to myself, what type of hell are they facing that they really feel their best option is to jump out of 40 some stories up or whatever above New York. And I remember she was holding her dress down. And I just was thinking, like, you know, even in this hellish situation, ultimately she knew what was going to happen, but she wanted to do it with dignity. And it just really struck me. So I, as corny as it sounds, I walked into the bathroom and just said to myself, it's time for me to go earn my citizenship. And my life started changing right after that.
Alf.
Amen. Going to Council Member Crowitz. Michael, sir.
Yeah, I shared a photo earlier of 1970 of the Twin Towers, you know, being built, and you can see one tower is like 90% there, and the other one's just getting started. And that was, you know, my whole upbringing. Basically, I grew up just outside of New York City, and you know, on a clear day out by the highway right near my house, you could see the Twin Towers and watch them being built from 10 miles away. And it was always just such a part of our world, and it was something that just doesn't have any real classification to it. Really, to say it's surreal really doesn't even begin to cover it. That something I watched them build for so many years would be just dismantled in a day so quickly. I mean, you see the first plane hit, and then it seemed like you know, that was not even getting into your head yet. You really hadn't processed that yet. And then it was just next thing for quite a while. And that really was a kind of a turning point in my life. Really big one, actually, because up until then I had been going over and working over in Amsterdam every year. I was taking a break over there and working over there on cannabis activism. And that was the year that just changed, and everything changed. It was really a different universe for a while. And I don't know, I don't even remember when it really ended. You know, is I guess for me, when I finally came out of that shell was almost 7 years later, something like that, in 2008. So that's quite a buffer, quite a period of time where it was different, you know, different world, different universe, different life, everything. Not like a pandemic, different kind of different. But yeah, nonetheless, very, very intense. So I was, for those who don't know me already, I served from 1981 to 86 in the Air Force. So I was out quite a while already. Yeah, it was something I really, I don't know how it would have hit me if I was, you know, 18, 19. I joined the military for really opportunities to be able to get educational opportunities, to get out of my hometown, get out into the world. And it seemed like the most efficient way to do that, given my circumstances. So I might have been just the kind of person that would really have been compelled to action based on that circumstance had I been a younger fellow. Hard to put myself in your shoes there, Ricardo. But yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Council Member. Council Member Boyer.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? You know, I'm just sitting here listening to everyone's stories, and I'm just kind of reflecting back where I was at. On that day, I was essentially halfway through my military career. I was a drill sergeant at Forcelli, Oklahoma, here I was, an 11 Bravo infantry guy in the land of field artillery. But I was very fortunate because the unit that I was at was really squared away. There was quite a few of us infantry guys there. When that happened, I just got off brigade staff duty, 24 hours, and walked into our battery. It took me over a year to stay battery instead of company. I used to catch hell for that. And I had the TV on. They'd already done PT, came back, ate chow, and then I was getting ready to pop smoke and go home. And then the TV was playing like it always does. And then they showed the footage of the first plane, and I was like, whoa, that's not good. Hung around, saw the second one hit, and right then and there, I was like, we're going to war. And, you know, there's so many things that was going through in my mind of how many directions this could go. I was instantly thinking, how can I get out of being on the trail as a drill sergeant and go back to Fort Campbell and deploy? I called my branch commander. I tried every trick in the book and it didn't work. At the time, I think there were 5 privates that were directly affected. And of those 5, 3 of them stayed. They were given the opportunity to go back home. I think of the 3, 1 did have an aunt that passed away in one of the towers. But the whole climate and the whole demeanor of basic training changed. We turned the flames up, and those privates, I think they understood that life changed. I mean, that was a historical moment. We would smoke them constantly because me and the other drill sergeants, we would get together and, you know, not just to smoke them for fun. It was for proper physical conditioning, because it's imperative that you are physically fit on the battlefield or you're not going to survive. So we knew that if we didn't turn the flames up a little bit and really make it challenging for these privates, when they go to AIT, when they go to their unit, if they are not physically fit to endure some, you know, the unknown harsh conditions, you know, we didn't know exactly how bad things would be. They would not be an asset to their team, to their platoon, to their unit. And so we kind of were able to rearrange physical fitness and some of the training and stuff like that. I continually tried to, on the side, to figure out how can I get out of, I mean, I enjoyed being a drill sergeant. The 16-hour days were kind of long, but, you know, at that point, I was halfway through my military career. I had trained for the past decade, live fire exercises, joint operations trainings, and I went to jungle warfare school before they closed Panama down, and out in NTC. I mean, every major training location I was fortunate to go to, and it did suck. JRTC down at Fort Polk was one of them for sure. It definitely changed, and I was just so anxious to leave there, and I finally got to leave in early '03. Went back to Fort Campbell before deploying a couple of times. Strangely enough, I retired in 2011 in May. In June 2011, I was in Kabul, Afghanistan. I picked up a private security gig, and I was in Kabul on the 10-year anniversary. Nothing dramatic happened that day, but on the 13th is when the U.S. Embassy got attacked, and we were like less than 1,000 yards away. So there was a lot of fun stuff happening around us, and that lasted a couple of days. But I often reflect back to trying to remember what life was like before 9/11, and it's hard because so much has changed. It's hard to articulate. And then just the recent 20-year anniversary, some of those thoughts and stuff would kind of creep back in, and I thought about the multiple deployments that I was fortunate to be of. I was thinking about that day in Kabul, Afghanistan. Things for the most part were pretty calm. A couple of days later, hell broke loose. I guess I'm lucky because I didn't personally know anyone that died that day in New York. But I know a lot of people who have relatives, close friends, loved ones. I can't imagine what that feels like. I lost close brothers on deployments, so I know what that feels like. But it's different. But so yeah, I mean, I could talk about that forever. So I'll end with that.
Thank you, sir. My service was done, needless to say. I did my war 10 years prior. So I was a civilian and I was working at a cannabis dispensary, Oakland Patients Group. And I remember waking up, getting ready to go manage the dispensary, which was very illegal at the time. And my roommate was watching on television and it was just the one tower smoking. And he's like, apparently a plane went into the tower. And I was like, oh shit. And jumped in the shower, got out, coming down the stairs, and that's when the second plane hit. And that's when I think all of us realized shit just changed. That's not normal. And then of course they rolled back and you saw it was two planes that actually flew in. And then rumor came out that there was third plane and there was a fourth plane. There was supposedly up to 6 planes at one point. But of course, we knew one that, went down. And of course, one of my employees was a student at the time in school in Washington, D.C. And she heard the plane go right over her school. And that was cause for alarm because there was no plane traffic over where she was going to school there in D.C. And next thing you know, then they turned to the Pentagon. And that's when I looked at my roommate and said, well, we're at war. I don't know about you, but shit's gone down. And it was such a surreal feeling and day. I went into the dispensary and I saw the owner at the time, and she was worried because her mom was working in the Transamerica Tower in San Francisco. I'm out here in California. So we weren't sure at the time because it was in the morning that potentially all tall buildings were a target at this point. And so San Francisco evacuated then the Transamerica Tower and everybody got out. And again, it was chaos and confusion because again, there were no cell phones. People have to realize we didn't have that communication. And even those street phones were challenging to use, to say the least, if they worked or if you could want to touch it for that matter, depending on where you were. Just saying, it was pretty bad. And so it wasn't until literally around noon that we were able to even get word from her mom that she was safe. It didn't affect anybody directly in my life, as in I didn't know anybody in the towers. I didn't know anyone in the Pentagon. I didn't know anyone on that flight that crashed. But I understood that it could have just as easily have been me. And in fact, a former lover of mine was actually supposed to be on one of those flights and inadvertently had to change her flight the day before, and happened to be a lucky individual because I would have never got to know her, or that's just life, unfortunately. So it didn't affect my life as much as I realized that things had changed forever. I did not feel the call in the sense to join. I already had done my time, so I was kind of too deep in my cannabis activism to step outside. I already committed my body and my time and my mind because we were already expected to be arrested every day I did what I did. So we went through raid drills. We were anticipating for when police came in. We allowed smoking on campus, so therefore we were always training for fire department drills for when people would smoke and pass out. If you fell or bounced, we automatically called 911. You get to deal with it. That's just the realities of how it is and how it was. So not sure where things would go and where things were going at that time. All I know was it was going to change everything about our lives. And so we'll go back around. And so our next question is, how did that day alter your life's trajectory? So we'll bring it back around and go to Diane, and then we'll follow up with Peter.
So immediately that day when I deployed, literally our mission changed, is because I had a 7-man surveillance team, and Redondo Beach is basically attached in between the Long Beach FBI field office and the LA field office, is we became a surveillance unit. And we were put to work immediately. And I think the very interesting part of that work was how Americans freaked out about their neighbors. And the surveillances that we were called to do, in many aspects, were simply based on they're Muslim. Like, you know, there was nothing other than they're Muslim. There's no probable cause, there's just nothing. And so we spent, you know, the last year of my my surveillance team before I got promoted to lieutenant, running back and forth, trying in many aspects to clear citizens from suspicion just as much as to find real bad guys. And it really showed me, and I mean, there's always this underlying issue of America and racism anyway. You know, as a patrol sergeant in Redondo Beach, we used to get calls from neighbors all the time. You know, there's a suspicious male black sitting in front of my house, and you know, it's the middle of the day during summer on a Sunday afternoon, and everybody's sitting in front of your house then. And so, you know, as a sergeant, I was always very cognizant of making certain our officers weren't going to, frankly, calls that were unconstitutional in nature, that would cause issues. And 9/11 just amplified that portion of America, and I think that saddened me in many ways. So, you know, so the work became is because I was running the surveillance team, I was the only person with the top security clearance, and it was a good experience, but I walked away from it a little jaundiced about how people really are, if that makes any sense.
No, it greatly does, for sure. You must tell us your cat's name.
Tiger the terrorist. She's actually she's a feral kitty that my German Shepherd rescued years ago. She's 12, and I used to jokingly call that she had killing fields in my house because she just looked like that, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing your thoughts there. Peter, following up with you.
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, after 9/11, I spent like the first month or so on the pile, a few days a week, and then spent like another 5 months after that, a couple days a week out at the landfill, just looking for remains, like anything you could find, like a wedding ring, a picture, something that you could give back to the family to bring them closure. You know, and then, you know, a few years later, around 2006 or so, I moved out of New York because I got tired of making that drive down to the federal courthouse, which wasn't far from Ground Zero. Just kind of weighed on me after a while, you know. And that's when I started to have some like physical symptoms of that something wasn't right. You know, and other things changed too. You know, I used to love to go to concerts. I used to like to go to places, but there was a lot going on, and now I don't enjoy those things quite as much anymore. But I just found other things to do to bring, you know, to bring joy. A little bit more hiking, a lot less concert going. You know. Even silly things like if I go into the shopping mall and there's too much going on, like too many colors, even, you know, I just decided let me get out of here. Just, you know, it changed me physically in a lot of ways. But, you know, at the same time, like I said before, man, it just, you know, you find ways to talk to people who were there. You know, you find ways to think about the good and push out the bad, and you just live, you know, to do the right thing. Since then, I've actually had a few other things came up. I was out your way for a little while, Rico. I was out in Phoenix. I was a group supervisor in Phoenix. Actually wound up testifying in front of Congress when that whole mess happened down there with my agency. Got a few innocent people out of jail. So, 9 to be exact, working cases, finding out that wrong people were arrested and fighting to get them out. So, even though I was in that dark place and, I realized that you can channel the energy that you have to still go out there and find something to fight for. So, and that's what I try to talk to folks about is, like I said, just making sure that you're channeling your efforts for something good, doing good for yourself, take care of yourself. And sometimes the best way to take care of yourself is to take care of others,
Yeah, that's why we do what we do. We're trying to take care of each other and as well as helping ourselves. But we have found part of our post-traumatic growth is helping others, and that satisfaction from helping others, that it's above service to ourselves. I look at it as, walking away from the battlefield, everything else is gravy. Back when I was in my service, we were going off Eastern Standard, Eastern Bloc attack, and I was artillery. And as a gun bunny, we learned that after our first rounds are fired, we were given back then 30 seconds to live before we would be nuked. So we literally fired our first rounds and counted off 30 seconds, and then we're like, woohoo! We beat the numbers. All right, let's see if we can make it a minute. So I mean, that's just, you don't have the luxury of when you're watching a movie and saying, oh, this is what's happening, this is what's happening, this is what's happening. This is where we were, this is what we were doing, this is how it happened. Pearson's unfortunately had to step away. He had some guests show up in Alaska, so I will turn this over at this point to Council Member Buckley.
Thank you. So, I kind of left it where there I was in the bathroom, looked at myself and said, it's time for me to go earn my citizenship. So before I went to UMass, I was playing for a pretty good football team back in Pennsylvania, and was getting recruited by a Naval Academy, but just had no desire to do anything in the military. Just kind of wanted to go to college, play ball, and do what college kids do, right? So I remember I called my one friend up from the Naval Academy and said, I'm thinking about getting in. I haven't talked to anyone about it, but what could I do in order to get over to the academy? And he goes, well, the tough part is you're going to have to start over again. And I'm like, what? He's like, well, you got to be like, go through plebe summer and be a freshman and all that. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, I don't want to miss the war. Stupid me, right? So talked to a couple more people, and kind of came around the school called Villanova right outside Philadelphia. They have a very good reputation in the Navy and Marine Corps. They actually have the second most admirals and generals behind the Naval Academy. So I'm like, hey, like 25 minutes from my house, whatever, that could work out. So started going through that. Then I went down, finished out the football season, and informed my coaches of what I was going to do. At first, they were kind of like, what, you're trying to transfer? And I'm like, no, I'm done playing football and I got to move on to something else in my life. And this is what I want to do. So they were really supportive of me. Went back for Christmas and told my parents what I wanted to do. My dad was like really proud. My mom was, pretty much like every mother would be. She was just very scared. So, went through the whole application process, all the interviews, and then I had to go into basically like where I had to go up into Newport, Rhode Island, to kind of miss up on 2 years of ROTC that I missed. And then when I went to Villanova, I went in as a junior. The original plan was to be a fighter pilot in the Navy. And just the more I started doing workouts, and obviously the Navy and Marine Corps were tied together, I just started seeing the Marines and what they were doing. It just felt like more of my tribe. So decided to go the Marine Corps route. I was very fortunate. The assistant Marine officer instructor, which is a gunnery sergeant, he was a force reconnaissance Marine. We really started kind of getting along, and he just thought like, hey, you need to be a guy on the ground. And went from like 235 down to like 185, and was in like good shape, everything like that. went through Officer Candidate School, made that. And then once I graduated, I graduated in the December of '04 and did that with my dress blues on, and just at that point raised my right hand and took my oath. And from there went on to the basic school, and then I made infantry officer, did infantry officer course, went to Iraq, came back, had me try out for recon, made that. They sent me right back to Iraq. And then when I came back from that, we just got into special operations. So went to selection and made that. And, had deployments around in like Africa and Southeast Asia. But to me, when I finally got my shot to go to Afghanistan, it was just such a rewarding feeling for me. I got to go into a place called the Helmand Province, which is a pretty rough area, but I was able to, I was all around Afghanistan when I was there. I was in Herat, Farah, Helmand, Kandahar, Bagram, and Kabul. And it was just, I really enjoyed my time there. And I know that sounds kind of weird. I mean, it was a very, very tough summer for all of us. We lost a lot of guys, a lot of good friends. I myself was wounded. But I don't know, it's just something there, it just felt right. And I'll just never forget, no matter what, I remember, we'd all be banged up and wounded and all that stuff. And, at times you might be looking like, what the hell am I doing? But I circled back to that lady I saw jump out of the building. And I remember just saying to the guys, I'm like, just imagine what she was going through. And before she made that jump, and some higher power came down and said, I'll give you the opportunity to go after these people and do justice. It would take her about 0.5 seconds to say, let me go. And I just thought it was a great honor that I had the opportunity to go fight for our country in that way. And, kind of take the fight to where it began from. It was just a real special time. And, again, I'm just always humbled that I had the opportunity to serve.
Well, needless to say, thank you for your service and what you did. Councilmember Prieta, you, sir, of course, we know what happened, but let everybody else know what happened. How did it alter your life's trajectory?
Well, so my life's trajectory, I was going either into the grave or prison. And my friends were going there too. It was a race. And when 9/11 went down, I was already trying to distance myself from that lifestyle and from a lot of my old friends that I was hanging around with and stuff. I didn't like the writing on the wall. And so I figured, man, fuck it. I might as well put my hat in the ring and get a chance to die doing something honorable than messing around here in the streets and doing something stupid and going out like a bum. And that's what I did. Like I said, I was a dropout, high school dropout, dropped out of my sophomore year and started working. And so I got laughed out of, I don't know, like 3 or 4 different recruiting offices. Finally found one, the Navy recruit on the South Side, said he'd work with me. And he told me I had to get my credentials. So I did. I went and got my GED, tested for that, brought it back. He said I needed to do my high school diploma. I was like, man, that's weird. Kind of thought I already checked that box, but whatever. I went back to a self-paced school and got my credits in an expedited fashion. Came back and they accused me of cheating. So I told them to go fuck themselves and walked over to the Army recruiter, showed him what I'd done, let him know what it was that I was trying to do. And he walked over with the paperwork to the Navy recruiter and gave him what for wasting my time. And took me back over, signed up some paperwork, asked me what I wanted to do. I didn't want a bonus or anything, just wanted to be in the military police corps because my grandfather was an MP and my cousin was actively serving as a MP, getting trained up and getting ready to head out to Afghanistan. And I said, I just want to be an MP and I don't want to be stationed stateside. I want to be in Germany, ideally. And I got both that. So I was good to go. All that took about a year on the delayed entry program. I hit basic or the welcoming center in Fort Leonard Wood. for in January, February timeframe. Graduated OSUT in May. Was over in Germany. Shortly thereafter, trained up with Ugly Platoon out of the 554 Military Police Company. And then we were tasked out with the 230th MP Company and headed out to Baghdad, Iraq for 2004, 2005. And was there with all the uprising with the sectarian violence and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, I signed up to go fight, to go and put it down and collect bodies, our bodies. Like those are our, like, we have to reduce the number that you just took from us and then some. Teach you a lesson, you know, where my head was at. And I didn't have any qualms about doing it. And then I found myself in Iraq, and I remember sitting in the bay, preparing myself mentally to go to Afghanistan, and then watching shock and awe take place in Iraq, feeling like I got hoodwinked. And I was like, damn, well, this just took a different tone and tenor. And so they told us right there, like, look, we can tell you, like, you're either gonna end up in Afghanistan or you're gonna end up in Iraq. Right? And it didn't matter. It was like, okay, well, I signed up for this, I volunteered. So I went and I did my thing. And my squad came back untouched, but we lost, well, not lost, but we had a good half of our platoon get roughed up and sent back to recover while we were deployed. And then just watching all the stuff that L. Paul Bremer and whatnot did during the de-Ba'athification process, firing the army, didn't make our job easier on the ground. It was just, it didn't sit well. So I didn't give it an opportunity to go back to Afghanistan and see what that was like. When I made it back stateside, terra firma, in the US, I was just like, man, I'm good. I got my hundreds of missions under my belt. Me and my peeps did our thing. I did have guilt because my squad, my platoon was going back for subsequent deployments. And it took me a while to get over not being there with them, right? Especially as they were getting banged up again. But I found my tribe, and it led me here through cannabis and whatnot, and helping to set the stage for my brothers and sisters coming home and getting out of the military to heal themselves. Looking back now at the fight is a worthy trajectory that I'm glad that I stepped on, but it was rocky there for a moment. But yeah, I wouldn't be here, certainly in the mental state or anything else that I am at present, had it not been for that moment. And that's another thing, like ATN said, makes service so important. Volunteers and getting out and doing the right thing, helping out our neighbors, regardless of their complexion or whatever else.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you. Councilmember Crowett, sir.
Thank you, ATN. You know, I've been trying to think here. It's very difficult to get my own brain back into where I was back in 2001. You know, the relationship we have with the federal government of the United States is so different now. Over the last several years, the last 10 or so years, as activists, we've met directly with the Office of National Drug Control Policy at least like twice a year. Had similarly, at least twice a year, we've met with the State Department and talked about all these various issues. Now we have the leader of the Senate putting in a marijuana bill for us. You know, I don't know, it's just such a different universe than where we were back in 2001, where we had much more of an adversarial relationship. I remember filling out patients at a time's application for accreditation so that they could get badges to go to UN meetings. And it said, you know, in a question, what's your relationship with government? And Al Burns said, yeah, our relationship is adversarial. So I wrote in adversarial as our relationship with our own government. But that's where we were for a very long time. And, you know, I was used to and very much, you know, sort of on guard for omnibus pieces of legislation that would come up right after a emergency. You know, we had the bombing, Oklahoma City bombing, and it seemed like, you know, months later, we had a 600-page bill that would fix the problem by shutting down all freedom on the internet, right? They didn't just write that; they were ready for an opportunity to throw it on the table, and that being on guard, watching for crazy big omnibus things that just come out of nowhere, and also this idea of the Trade Center being attacked, being out of the blue. I put in a couple of links, and this isn't conspiracy theory stuff. This is just just watching the news. I mean, I grew up watching the towers. They were always something of interest to me. So anytime they would come up anywhere, it would key on it, right? So in 1993, when someone tried to blow up the trade centers by lighting off a bomb in the parking garage, I paid attention to that. And then right before, like it was like 6 months, March, April, May, June, July, August, yeah, 6 months before the trade centers, one of the TV shows that I watched, it was a spinoff of the X-Files called The Lone Gunman. I actually had an episode where they tried to fly a 747 into the trade center and blame it on terrorists. So, it's like, holy cow, this is like, really strange, fiction crossing over with reality moment for me. I think looking back in where my head was at that moment, again, not to fall in any kind of conspiracy theory, but just to think, my God, this is something they tried, and now they finally succeeded kind of thing. And the government's acting like it was completely out of the blue. And the reactions that we had were extraordinary. And I think there was a line, there was a point that we started at where we had the whole world support and we were working on an earnest cause. And then at some point we went off the rails. And I don't think it went off the rails as much as I would have feared it might. There was not that I remember anyway, no 6,000-page omnibus bill just taking advantage of that. But many look at some of the conflicts that we got into, especially like going to Iraq, as being gratuitous. I won't get into that. It's just something I'll throw out there. I don't personally have a real strong feelings either way on any of that, but I just want to point out that that this relationship was tough back then. Etienne talked a little bit about it, but it was a tough relationship with government, and it was years before we would really get back to a point where we were working together in any kind of realistic way. Under, I guess, the Obama administration. When I say we, I'm talking about the cannabis movement and the executive branch of the United States. So, yeah, interesting time.
Yes, it was. Pearson, it seems you made it back to us. Thank you, sir. So how did this affect 9/11? How did it affect your life's trajectory, sir?
I guess the short answer is it didn't really affect my trajectory of what I was thinking I was going to do at the time of the attacks, but I wasn't worried about not going to war anymore. I was pretty sure that was going to happen. But I guess speaking on what I expected to happen, what I didn't expect to happen. I didn't expect to go over to a country where I thought I was going to see intense battle, and don't get me wrong, I had to pull the trigger a few times, and a few times it was directed at me. Luckily, I'm too quick for them, right? That's a joke. But while I was there, and this, I guess this really did affect my trajectory, was the humanity that I found there, the people that some of them didn't even know there was the World Trade Center or towers that fell that day, and the reason why we were there when it happened or years after. What I saw was people trying to live their lives, and majority, if not all, but a very, very few of the individuals that I came in contact with, both the deployments, were just trying to live their life best way they knew. I think I'm I put this so I don't sound like a be more of an asshole than I already do. I was afforded the opportunity to go somewhere where I wouldn't have been able to go prior, and learn a lot about human beings and why I should care more about doing good than finding out what it feels like to kill somebody that's trying to kill me. It turns out it's not that, you know, there's nothing fun with that. Moreover, I think worse is having the responsibility to tell other individuals to do just that. The time I spent in Iraq and Al Anbar province, both times we were, my first deployment, we were in a company size base within a town, the town of Pitt, and you know, it was an experience. We did a couple operations. We went door to door, kicked in everyone, searched everyone, took weapons, blew up all the caches of weapons and explosives that we could find. Even an enemy, a gentleman that decided to shoot at us with a bulletproof, or not bulletproof, a vest on. He didn't get it off in time, so we just threw some C4 on him and called it a day. You know, at the time it was something that, you know, pretty gnarly thing to see. But, you know, I realized that what we were doing in Iraq, I guess I haven't realized that yet. I mean, I have assumptions, and it allowed me to realize the importance of humanity, and why it doesn't matter. Well, and personally, why it doesn't matter if somebody likes me, or even more importantly, doesn't like me, because I'm going to do my best to help them out with anything I could potentially help them with, whether or not they care for me or not. And there's an important lesson. And as much as I hindsight look back, wish I didn't have to do a lot of this stuff, I wouldn't know to do what I know is right now if it weren't for the trauma and the days of just complete, just being completely miserable. I mean, we got a shower, and we had a shower tank come once in like the 3 months we were at our forward operating base, and I did not get there in time to take a shower. It was incredible. But the opportunities that were afforded to me in a really odd way, I look at as self-growth, and it just sucks that a lot of people died because of those planes going into those towers that day.
Yeah, it altered many different lives, not just ours. Needless to say, it didn't affect my life's trajectory in any way, shape, or form. I already was serving in the drug war on the front lines. So for me, that didn't necessarily change anything. But I will turn it over to Councilmember Boyer, because it sounds like it definitely had an effect on your life's trajectory as a drill sergeant at the time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that day certainly changed the trajectory of my life. And like, the short version is, because of that day, is why I'm a better version of me today. What I mean is, when that happened, I was fucking pissed. I wanted to go deploy. I wanted to go back to infantry unit. I wanted to, go do infantry things because that's what I had trained to do. But of course, in that space, that translated into turning the flames up, really conditioning the privates, getting them prepared. And it changed my mindset. I think back and I can almost see myself as, this may not be the best phrase to use, sleepwalking. That day woke me up, made me really pay attention. I think myself and maybe many military service members or Americans may have developed this sense of false security, like no one's never going to attack America. We're fucking America. That changed that day. And I think that's what kind of woke me up, meaning I started paying attention more to what's going on in the world, because I quickly discovered that something that's not on your radar can absolutely affect you where you're at. And that day is a perfect example. So I started paying attention to a lot of different things. It put fire in my belly to train harder, to become more proficient at every skill set needed to be successful. And I'd like to think that translated, over into the training with the privates. And, I was humbled when I deployed, because I ran into some of these privates that I thought, because not all of them were field artillery. Some of them were different MOSs. But I was humbled. I was made a pit stop on this 1-5, and I hear Drill Sergeant Boyer, and I'm like, hey, I'm not a drill sergeant anymore. Come here, knucklehead. And it was humbling to run across, I think it was like 4 or 5 prior privates that had deployed. And then many years down the road, I found myself as an ROTC instructor at Lehigh. And so it wouldn't surprise me if the Ranger Challenge, which is an event that happens in the fall with area and regional ROTC programs, I believe Villanova was at it a couple times. So the cadets, training them, who were going to become a commissioned officer in multiple branches. Many of them were infantry, and some were aviation. They were some hard chargers. I really enjoyed that job a lot. That was the last assignment that I did active duty before I retired and then went over to Afghanistan. While I was in Afghanistan doing private security, I was humbled again. I did not expect this. I ran into some of those former cadets that were now second lieutenants, first lieutenants. One was the infantry platoon leader out in JBAD. One was flying Apaches down in Kandahar. One was flying Blackhawks all over. And one was already in the special operations community, kicking doors down. And I was able to connect with them while we're all in country. And we always joked that, somehow we'd link up in Kabul and go do a beer run. That never happened. I wished it could have. And then later, the one individual that was special operations, he continued on his path in that field and ended up becoming a SIF commander and was really scuffing some ass up in a real big way. He got out last year, graduated from MIT. He's a smart guy. So he's off doing some really cool stuff now. But I was humbled. And so I would like to think that because of that day, it changed who I am. It made me start paying attention. It made me hungry for knowledge, to be proficient at what it takes to stay alive. After I retired, once I went to Afghanistan, and once I said my cup is full and left Afghanistan, I came home and I was in a little bit of a weird space of like, what now? And I was very fortunate to find myself in a position to where I could connect with veterans. I could help them overcome barriers, whether it was, dealing with past trauma, figuring out how to create a new mission for them post-military, Many of them with post-traumatic stress, many of them with drug and alcohol addiction, some of them with homelessness, just a whole host of different barriers. And so everything that had happened to me decades before, learning to be proficient at inducing trauma, I transitioned into this mode of learning how to cope, deal, and heal with trauma. And of course, that path led me into cannabis, trying to be a best advocate, ambassador for that, fighting that. That's my new mission, on top of helping veterans overcome barriers, and pursuing wherever this insane, complex path forward, to get cannabis, just medical cannabis, it doesn't matter. It just needs to be legal. And that's a whole other mountain. But that day, as weird as it sounds of me saying it, I'm thankful for that day because it transformed who I am. But that came at the expense of 3,000 plus people that's not here anymore. So maybe in some weird kind of way, my way to pay tribute and honor those is to be the best version of me and help as many veterans as I can, or civilians too. They deserve love. And that's my mission. That's, I will spend the rest of my life trying to help heal, deal with trauma, prevent trauma. There's already enough chaos in the world and it's already tough. So I try not to add to that. So that's the journey and the path that I'm on. And, I don't need a compass for that. It's embedded in me. So I know the direction that I want to go. So.
Thank you, council member. So again, I'll reiterate, it didn't change my life's trajectory. However, what happened during that day changed all of our lives in the sense that we saw legislation such as the Patriot Act. We saw the surveillance state increase. FISA warrants blurred the lines between intelligence gathering and crime fighting. I think Peter and Diane have both spoken toward that, but we'd like their further insight on it. So we're going to go over to Diane.
I think some of the lessons and are so important, and everyone understands this term because law enforcement uses it also, is mission creep, right? We try to stay in our lanes, the law enforcement in particular, and the federal government. I did a lot of surveillance work with the DEA, did a lot of stuff with the ATF in Southern California, is that if you give us a tool, we're going to use it. And we're not going to think about the unintended consequences of it. And, I pulled up an article that I wrote way back, like in 2014, that very specifically looked at the Patriot Act. And once it first started, like the first year, I think the stats were very minuscule. There was only like 51 or just a very, very small portion. But by 2013, we had issued over 11,000 FISA warrants. And out of those, only 0.5% were for terrorism. And out of all of those, from a narcotics standpoint, I think it was a tremendous amount. It was something like over 9,500 were for narcotics, for a war on drugs that really has ultimately failed American society. And, you see this, and Richard, you talk about it, we could do 2 hours just on the failure of the war on drugs, and why we're in an opioid issue right now is because the continued interventions on supply side interventions that just don't work, rather than taking public health approaches that are much more science-based. And so, the surveillance state is something that we're still dealing with. I'm in the middle right now of legislative work in Congress, and the NDAA is up right now. And there's a lot of controversy over 1033 program and what's going to happen to all the military equipment now that we've pulled out of Afghanistan. Who's going to get it? How is that going to be deployed against American citizens? And so I think we have to be really careful. I think from my perspective and the policy work that I'm doing and trying to end the drug war in particular, is that we have to be very careful of mission creep and how we hold our government accountable for not respecting our rights.
And Peter, of course, you were involved in the Fast and Furious. You were considered a whistleblower for that. So this is a kind of a next step in the sense of the Patriot Act. Were you able to use these surveillance tools that the Patriot Act had emboldened to police officers like yourself at the time? Was
No,
that
no.
part of your tool set?
No, and I wasn't involved in the Fast and Furious case itself at all. Actually, I was a supervisor in Phoenix, and truthfully speaking, when agents were doing the regular stuff that agents do, stopping cars, asking probative questions, the prosecutors weren't doing their job in prosecuting cases. So people tried to get fancy and reinvent the wheel, and that's what led to Fast and Furious. But I was more involved in battling with the U.S. Attorney's Office, trying to get them to do their job. And I had absolutely no role in Fast and Furious whatsoever, other than when that investigation started. People were like, hey, you need to talk to that supervisor because he's been banging heads with the U.S. Attorney's Office who weren't doing their job. So lo and behold, I got subpoenaed, testified, and a short time later was thrown out of the state of Arizona and had to work somewhere else. But what Diane said is true. I'll go back to my time as a cop where I walked the beat, and when back New York had stop, question, and possibly frisk, right? Stop, question, and possibly frisk. As time went on, that later became, the jargon became stop and frisk because it was abused. Like Dan said, when people provide tools to law enforcement, there's a potential that they could be used the wrong way. The courts have a duty to some degree to make sure that they're not just signing warrants, that where all the steps aren't taken, and that the Fourth Amendment has not been fully taken into consideration. So, I mean, there's shortcuts you got to point fingers at law enforcement. You also have to point fingers in some instances at prosecutors' offices that are taking these warrants and shepherding them with law enforcement to these judges. And then you got to take, into consideration, there are some judges who will just sign anything. So, I mean, there's really a lot of fingers to be pointed in many different directions. I think the important thing that law enforcement needs to realize is that, look, we have a duty. We serve. We're part of the community. We have a duty to serve the community, to have empathy. And when you do things, and I don't care what it is that you do, when you do things that betray the trust that is bestowed upon us by the community, and when you lose that trust, that's incredibly difficult to get it back. And that's why I think, as law enforcement officers, people should strive to always do the right thing. In my career, 35 years, have never been involved in a FISA warrant. My agency, the nature of the work that we do, I'm not aware of anybody personally who has been involved in one, but I know the Bureau has been involved in quite a few. And in watching the news, I also know that the courts recently criticized them for some involvement in FISA abuses as well. So, I mean, it's a systemic breakdown. And you got to blame the legislators too, because they need to fix it. I mean, there certainly needs to be measures taken, because civil liberties are so important. The Constitution, and I know it's some folks don't revere it as much as we do, and it's not as revered now as it once was, but it's an important document because it protects us all.
Absolutely does it protect us all, and one that I've always stood behind as a constitutionalist. And so any types of challenges to our freedoms or definitely infringe upon, I definitely used my voice, as well as Michael and others, to use our cacophonies, but even the raising of our voices didn't stop it from happening or passing or moving forward consistently through numerous presidents and administrations and different Congresses. So it still continues to this day. So I don't want us to necessarily belabor on it too much longer, but it was an interesting carrying on. I'll turn over to Council Member Prieta.
So I just wanted to touch real quick. My mentality was able to cool a bit in the year that I had in that delayed entry program. It went from stack bodies to, all right, what are we getting into? It's getting real. I'm getting close to shipping out. I'm in the military police corps, what are the requirements, it's that. And then my training, 5 months for whatever that's worth to go into an environment like that, on top of maybe 4 months in the field, getting ready to go down range with no real training on the Constitution, certainly not reading through the document word for word. I wasn't issued my own little Constitution packet when I got to boot camp, but I did swear an oath to protect and uphold it for whatever that means. And so when we got downrange finally in Baghdad, it was right on the heels of the Abu Ghraib situation. And we had big old shiny targets, these MP Bazaars on our shoulders. And with a nice $25,000 bounty for anybody that can get us, kill us, and get our Bazaar back, it's proof, right? Or whatever other documentation because of that incident. And it really felt counterintuitive. A lot of the things that we were doing, like the de-Baathification process, firing the army, torturing the citizens, just rallying them up and stuff like that, creating people who now feel some kind of way and are gonna do what they gotta do to feel better about that or not, right? So seeing that go down, it's like, oh man, like I don't recognize any of this. I don't know what's going on. And I really haven't gotten into the Patriot Act or anything like that, except to read about or hear Snowden's account for the oversteps and stuff. But I don't feel good about the targeted killing of Americans in Yemen. I think we should have swooped them up, brought them back, put them in front of, the courts under due process of law, and put them under judgment with their peers, as opposed to Obama just kind of sending in the drone strike to take homie out. But that's how I feel on that subject and the overreach. And I think it's all of our jobs. There's a lot going on with the politics and the bills, and some of these things are massive, 1,000-page bills that hardly challenge somebody in that position. Have you read it? It's more like the team, an army that disseminates to them what it means. So there's just a lot beyond the Patriot Act. Thank you.
No, that is, and that's the new reality we have in the realm, and why we're still challenging and working on the drug war. We don't see what we want still from our government, so we will still work toward it. But we're going to move on from this subject and talk about another amazing time, which was, of course, the horrible day that was 9/11. But at the same time, the spirit of 9/12, or the weeks after 9/11, we saw a patriotism. I don't think you could go into a store and find an American flag if you tried to 2 weeks after 9/11. It was resounding patriotism and the backing of what had gone down, because, as Council Member Boyer stated, we hadn't been attacked like this since World War II, and it wasn't Japan, etc. So at this level and at this great psyche scar on the American culture, the resounding back was kind of our own middle finger to the world, in the sense of, whoever did this, we're coming for you. We're not going to sit down and lay down and let it happen. And some people are asking for that time to come back, as we see the cultural divides that have encompassed America in the last 4 so years. So, how did it make you feel? What was that feeling for you on 9/12? That if you could capture it, what did it mean to you? How do we keep it alive? We'll start off with Diane.
I think it's inclusiveness. It was, weirdly enough, is, the best of America is, I remember the support. I remember um, everything about, I mean, I even remember the first pitch that Bush threw out at the baseball game, remember? And I, you know, it was about resiliency. And I think that's why I was so disappointed that when I started doing the surveillance, it's like, hey, these are the same people that are showing, you know, the really great part of America, that, you know, when things are down, you know, during an earthquake or during a hurricane, that we're there to help our neighbors. I think that's, you know, what America is about. For me, I'm an immigrant. I was born in Mexico City. I came to the United States when the 1960s. You know, there's this ideal. And so how do we promote that ideal? Not the American exceptionalism relative to we're, you know, the only country that knows how to run the world, not the global police, you know, the police officer of the world, is what it means to live up to the ideal of America, and that all of us can help each other and have a moral obligation to do so in many ways. You know, and I think that's, you know, right now, especially, we have another, you know, potential issue tomorrow. There's another demonstration in DC with the hard right. And so you look at this polarization across the United States, and I wonder what it's going to take for us to come back together. I watched January 6th this year, and I got some of the very same feelings that I did in watching the towers go down. And it wasn't good. In fact, it was worse because they were our own citizens. So I don't know, you know, I wish we could get back, you know, what's it going to take for us? I think it's every single one of us has to do a good act, that we have to look at our neighbors with compassion and empathy, and that all of us have struggles, and that, you know, every day I do my job as the executive director of LEAP with the basis of trying to make our world better, trying to end the harms of overcriminalization and our drug policy and all that. And I think if each of us individually did one good act a day, helped one person every single day, that could create that American ideal again. But I'm an optimist. Okay, I think we're capable of it.
And thank you for your work and what you do, because it's reflected in that, and that's a service that many Americans could learn from, needless to say. And thank you for your service to us and our country, needless to say. Peter, I guess it's kind of an injustice to ask you about 9/12, since you were, again, knee deep in it till you said 9/13, until when you actually went home. So I guess for you then, after a night's sleep, what was it like on 9/14?
No, I mean, look, like I said, midday, September 11th, we changed. All the things that separated us went away. They went away completely. You know, I went back there down to ground zero, and people continued to act that way. And, you know, I mean, you see celebrities. I mean, Steve Buscemi, the actor, spent days on the pile, no fanfare, no cameras in his face, no media coverage, moving, doing grisly, disgusting work, you know, moving, you know, looking for body parts. There were other celebrities that were down there as well. So, I mean, everybody came together. There was no class. There were no different races. There was no difference in whether you were gay or straight. Nobody cared what your religion was. So, I mean, it was a sense of unity. And what bothers me the most about it is, and this is in hindsight, is we did incredible things right after September 11th. I mean, what happened down at ground zero was, you would think, impossible. And think about that for a second. So it took a tragedy for us to get there. And now you look at what's going on, where we've become so divided. And let's be candid. Who's dividing us, right? It's not regular people. It's elected officials on both sides of the aisle because they want to meet their talking points. And it's media because they want to hype certain things up. That, you know, you rarely see stories about things that are good out there. You only hear about the bad stuff. If it leads, it leads, I guess, so to speak. So, I mean, until we're ready to embrace folks going into elected office who will reach across the aisle and work with each other and find common ground. We're in a bad place. I mean, listen, what happened on at the Capitol was horrible, and I had family members that were there in law enforcement who were terrified for their life. But they were no more or less terrified than U.S. Marshals working at a federal courthouse in Portland, or some law enforcement officers working in cities where there were other unrest, whether it be Proud Boys, whether it be any group. And until we're ready to condemn violence, period, regardless, and violence against property as well as violence against people are both bad things. Until we're ready to do like we did years ago, where we would condemn that and we would never embrace that as some sort of a just act, I think we're in a bad place. So until we're ready to come together as people and stop embracing and re-electing politicians that divide us, we're not going to get any better. But think about it. If we continued that momentum of togetherness that we had on September 12th and 13th, what else could we have accomplished had we not, as a society, allowed them to divide us? It's troubling. And look, I feel bad for everybody who goes into politics, because I think even the most well-intentioned person that tries to enter into politics in its current form is going to be torn apart and demonized unless you're willing to be on either side. It's like a football field. Most of the American people are on the field, and the political parties are in the end zones. Until they're willing to start coming out of those end zones and coming onto the field, we're going to have a big problem.
Well stated and well put, needless to say. Councilmember Crowitz, would you like to speak to your post 9/11 realities?
Yeah. I got a question at the last second, just I was going to answer you. Sorry. So, yeah, I got a monitor question dialogue box now. Sorry, I think we got all the problems out of the way. We faced a common enemy. You face a common enemy, you joined together. I felt like it was normal. I didn't feel like any of that was normal, but I felt like it was normal response, for everybody to wave the U.S. flag and to, really join to people in every country in the world were waving U.S. flags. I mean, it was a really incredible moment there. It really was. It's really taken me a minute to even get my brain back to that, but it really was. I was thinking about what you were saying earlier, Etienne, the 30 seconds that you had, that you counted off and waited to see if you were going to get a return barrage. It's a strange comparison to my world, because you had 30 seconds and you might get a return barrage. I had 30 minutes and we were going to get a return barrage. But that was only if these certain bombers left the ground, our alert bombers left the ground. We were told we had 30 minutes before the return hit everywhere. So, after surviving that, I don't know, it puts things in perspective in a different way, maybe, than any other thing you could experience. You sort of existential threat every day for a while. Yeah, I'm really, I don't know. Really, I love you, Diane. I love you so much. I love your take on this, and I love your position, the way you stated it. And I am an optimist as well, but I'm not that much of an optimist, at least not enough to have come up with that on my own. I don't know. We're at a strange place where we faced a new threat. I mean, from every logical perspective, we faced a new common threat with this virus, but yet that became political. Maybe it's not a good comparison for me. I don't know, but it just seems like even now, maybe if we face a common threat, we might not even solidify the way we did then. I don't know. Judging from that, I would hope I'm wrong. I would hope that there's some special thing about the virus that made it, vulnerable to that kind of division. But the divisions that happened after 9/11, I remember them very clearly. It was absolute unity until there wasn't, until there was differences of opinion about what we were doing and where we were going and what we were saying. And the minute there was difference of opinion, then all of a sudden there was finger pointing, and you weren't really a patriot because you're disagreeing. You're not really a, whatever, the labeling started. That's at least how I remember it. But yeah, I want to take a moment to say something else. It sort of fits in before, and I just want to, hopefully you guys will humor me, but there's a big overarching issue. I was looking at, before at the, a couple of the big issues that came up after 9/11, and there was what I would call an inside issue and an outside issue, where the outside of the United States issue would be like Guantanamo Bay or whatever, torture issues or whatever, where we went and where we didn't go with our military, for example. But inside and outside, we have the surveillance state stuff. And this overlaying everything is just something that happened because of the digital age. And I just want to make a point of that and maybe see where it fits in later. But before we had thing carnivore and echelon. This is stuff that I paid attention to early on in my activism. And basically the way the surveillance worked back then was the system surveilled for keywords. If there was a keyword, then they basically, they parsed it and then they recorded it, and if there was something to parse, they record it. And now we have a system that records everything and then parses it. And that's basically the only difference. I mean, it really is just that subtle of a difference. It's not like this is a new thing to surveil everyone. If you look at, like I said, carnivore and echelon, you'll read an interesting history of that. But it's the way it's done and the way it's saved and everything because of the digital age that makes it so different. So maybe that's part of it, is just the advances that we've had, the evolution of our species and the evolution of our social engagement with each other, all happening at the same time that other things are happening, and it might be conflating one and another.
All right, Council Member Boyer.
Yeah,
How
the
do we
day
get-
after, I'm sorry, go ahead.
How do we get that feeling back? How do we do that?
It's hard. And I do want to echo a point that Diane mentioned that I think is absolutely spot on. It starts with the individual and then it radiates outward. For me, like I said, the day after, I was definitely changed with everything that I spoke about before. And it's funny, earlier you had mentioned about being able to go into a convenience store and all the American flags were sold. You couldn't find one. And that's a great thing. The sarcastic infantryman in me, a couple of days afterwards, I was thinking, no, it's great. Military, we're getting some love, we're getting some recognition. But the sarcastic me, and I don't know, maybe I was just dumb and ignorant. I was like, oh, so now that the enemy's at the gate, you love us. Where were you, the past 10 years? But that's probably just more of an internal ego thing. To get back to where we were on that day, I don't know if it's possible. And let me attempt to explain why. I think that common threat placed everyone in a unique space where all these other social issues just ceased to exist, and everybody helped out, because it took such a horrible tragedy like that to invoke that in everyone simultaneously. Everyone was on the same page. Unfortunately, I think as time went by, we as humans become complacent. And I think simultaneously, if you look at the emergence of media technology, social networks, a lot of big issues were getting politicized, and that bleeds into identity politics. And it's just this big snowball of shit that just made a lot of things get worse. Things were polarized, but in a strange kind of way, when a natural disaster hit, hurricanes, tornadoes, there's these small pockets of that same mentality of everybody pitching in, regardless of who you are, where you come from. It was help. And I think we're hardwired. I think we're genetically wired to help other humans. But we let all these modern social issues kind of get in our way. But there's still so small pockets of people that will drop whatever they're doing to help another human life. And I think we are just wired that way. Today, how do we get there again? I don't know, because I think on that day, there was a moment in our human history, at least in our modern time, that the best things about us were amplified and everybody could see that and feel it. You only get a sense of that, like I said earlier, about these small pockets of hurricane relief, tornado cleanup, and natural disasters. You get to sense that a little bit, but man, if you could just scale that back to where it was on the 12th of September, this place would be just that much better. But to echo what Diane said, it starts with the individual. Every day, make effort to project something positive outward. There's already enough negative shit in the world. And so if everybody collectively did their one thing each day, the world's going to be a little bit better. But to be able to get, everyone on that same page on the day after of 9/11, sadly, I think it would take something, just as bad, if not worse than that, to have everyone shed all this stuff about them, whether it's political, to jump on board and work as one. I am, to an extent, somewhat optimistic, but I'm realistic. I think I try to be realistic, and just kind of survey the world as it appears, how I perceive it. And I see a lot of great things, but I also see a lot of negativity that's really hard to combat. And, again, the only way to, I guess, address that is, as Diane said, as an individual, put something out in the world that's positive.
Thank you, council member. Council member Buckley.
Yeah, so I just remember those days pretty vividly. Like I was mentioned before, obviously football was canceled that weekend, but I remember one of the first games I played in post 9/11 was at the University of Delaware, and we're driving from Massachusetts. I think we stopped at a Giant stadium. We actually practiced there, and it was just we saw the towers as we're going by, and it was kind of crazy. Then you get to Giant Stadium, and I just remember all of our football bags were pulled out, and all these dogs are they had the canine dogs out there sniffing them, and you're just like, man, this is just the world has definitely changed, right? Great understatement. But anyway, we're at Delaware in a great stadium. They get a good 45 to 50,000 people crowd, and they played God Bless America, and you had 50,000 people just start singing the song. And here I am getting ready to play a football game, and I have tears in my eyes. And I remember I looked down the line at all the guys playing, and it was kind of that awkward, we all looked and we're did one of those things, we didn't make eye contact, but it was a pretty amazing moment, and just the chills I had in my body. It's going to take a lot of work for us to get back to something like that. And yeah, I totally love what Diane said. It starts with you. As oddly as it sounds, as patriotic or loving America as everyone was back in that time frame of 2001, I remember Amherst made people start taking down their American flags. So I was at UMass Amherst, and there's 5 colleges around there, and they said it was offending people. So kind of sounds like a crazy thing, right? But here we are today, where people can take a knee for the flag. That's your right. You go for it. You got people, all they do is badmouth this country who live here, who I really don't think have a clue how the rest of the world is. I'm not saying we're perfect by any means, but I truly believe in this experiment called America, and we are the greatest thing this world has ever seen. I mean, people literally flood to our country. People aren't trying to escape our country. So maybe people should put that in context. And I always tell people, people talk about news and what's going on, and did you hear what that politician said or that politician said? And you can tell what news they're watching, basically by the way they react. And you almost want to be like, hey man, pump the brakes. Watch local news, read a newspaper, go look on the internet. But you turn on Rachel Maddow, she's going to say one thing. You turn on Sean Hannity, polar opposite, saying the same different thing, and it's the same situation, and both sides are going to say, no, it's that person and that person. It's just ridiculous, and it's out for ratings. So I just think, yeah, people, starts with you. Be a good person, do good things with people, just, not for any glamour or for cameras around you. And it's just amazing how things kind of start reciprocating its place. And this again is kind of the American way. I think we're all great people. I think it's a very kind of, I would say almost like 95% of Americans are just probably awesome people. And then you probably have like a 5% who just wake up in the morning to say, what can I get pissed off about and make a big deal about it and go on Twitter and do this, and it's just like, relax. So that's just things, it's gonna be really hard, and it's a really deep question to think about it. But I think we can get there. I think we saw a little bit of that actually with the Afghan withdrawal. I mean, I think everyone was kind of going WTF, like, I don't care who your political party or whatever it was like, this is bad and this is wrong. And it was really cool to see Americans coming together. Hell, you had Americans, retired veterans, not retired veterans, that's like an oxymoron. You had vets going over there into Afghanistan, putting up their teams to go and do things that, the military can only do what they do. They don't implement policy. We know that. They just follow orders. But these Americans said, screw it. Let's take it ourselves. I mean, that's America, like not sitting around waiting for a handout or for someone to take care of you. We are the government. We control this country. And it's just great to see people take initiative. And that really inspired me. And I don't think it got really the news coverage it should have, to be honest. Like, I mean, I think it was a really heartwarming story that could have really maybe put some perspective to others. But yeah, hey, take it easy on the media. God bless you all. This has been a lot of fun talking with you. And like I said, I think eventually we'll get there.
Thank you, council member. Council member Prieta.
Well, I mean, it's hard because my people were all coming together, like my people, my tribe, my soul counterparts were all coming together and trying to figure out what to do and supportive of each other. But the opposite of that, we're killing people in gas stations here in Arizona for wearing or looking for being Sikh because they're ignorant people going out doing violent acts against people who they don't know and don't understand because somebody said somewhere that somebody that fit a general description did that horrible thing that we all witnessed. And for me, a couple of days after that, I was at a sports park with my cousin standing in a giant American flag. We were like over 10,000 people who got together for this aerial photograph that went around. And that's a great spirit that I want to get back to. And the way I try to do that is to take accountability for what I have going on day to day in my life, in my thoughts, and how I'm interpreting, usually making assumptions, which makes it they say when you're assuming, you're making an ass out of you and me. And so I try to get rid of the critical thinking like that. And then I have above my computer here, attitudes of mindfulness, and just try to stay in the present and be appreciative of the butterflies and the lizards and the puppies and the beautiful silence in nature and the feeling that I get when I help people and go and volunteer for nothing other than to be there and know that I can and give back to my community, give back to my people. And I know that there's bad things out there. I know it. I've experienced it, seen it. But there's good things out there too. And my people are doing good things. And so I'm searching them out. And that's how I wake up day to day to try to change what I can in my realm. None of us are superhuman. None of us are God. And when it comes down to it, we're all just trying to work with what we have, where we're at. And as we multiply, hopefully we start to have more of a powerful voice to counter the narrative that's been repeated for far too long that has us at each other's throats. So I don't know, don't be a dick. Wake up and try to be kind. To sum it up. Thank you.
Well, that's eloquent as hell. Well, I love you. Thank you, council member. Council member Crosby up in the state of Alaska. How do y'all maintain that 9/12 feeling?
Well, we definitely vote for Rico if he was running for Congress. So Alaska, so growing up in Philadelphia, living in Alaska for the past 6 years, I'm really glad I stayed. Didn't decide to move from here. It's probably one of the best places to be in this type of situation, or the past year. There's so much that I would like to cover with this, but obviously I'm gonna try to keep it under 2 minutes. I think we have a problem. Yes, it starts with the individual, and the individual needs to understand that in a broad spectrum. I mean, I think we are not only the people that spread the poisons, the negativity, are in the minority. So are we, the ones that are willing to speak out on injustice and things that are that we've found to bring us closer to bettering the world, or bring us closer to a better world. I think we've lost a lot of freedoms that we just don't even recognize anymore. I mean, TSA, the beef up there. I mean, the likelihood of someone trying to jack a plane or bring something dangerous in is, it's blown out of proportion. That's me with my opinion. We were scared. We came together, and then we were scared into submission. As a whole, and it's like, well, what are you going to tell somebody when they're like, well, I don't want my child to be in danger. It's like, well, I don't want your child to be in danger either, but I don't want my child to be in danger. It's but the picking and picking and picking, and eventually it adds up. I use the toad or the frog in boiling water and lukewarm water getting boiled to death. We won't really notice it because it's slowly, these freedoms slowly creep into our lives, and it becomes normal, especially over generations. I mean, we were only supposed to have a Navy. We weren't even supposed to have a standing army when the Constitution was written, but it just increases. And what we're getting at is a point of us being afraid to be around each other, being around strangers. I think that's the most dangerous part, because the only time anything's really happened, whether it's violence or nonviolent protests or people coming together and showing the powers that be that, no, we're not going to stand for this. And if we're afraid to talk to each other, and we're being divided in a way to not even ask questions. Like I had so many questions when the BLM stuff was coming out, and I'd just been shut down so many times, like I'm some type of horrible person. It's like, no, I just want, please explain this to me and how this is happening, and just being able to talk with one another. And I think if we were able to actually recognize what goes on the rest of the world compared to us, and how lucky we have it, and how much more we can do to not just better our country, but better the world, so that we're not worried about people flying planes into our damn buildings. One missed shot with a rocket is potentially a significantly more a number of enemy that we might have to fight again, or our troops are going to have to deal with in a day that we can put a rocket in the size of with accuracy up to a square foot. I think I don't know what I think. It is a deep question, and I don't know. We got to realize that people aren't out to get us, and God damn, stop acting like the platform that we're on actually is helping. Call your congressman and get down and do something that actually helps and help people. Put your hand out and give assistance. Don't just give prayers and condolences and empathy. Empathy is for cowards and lazy people if you don't act on that empathy, or at least try to help. And go and just my last point. We need to realize that a lot of the things that we have in our justice system, stuff that is immoral legally, doesn't all the time line up with the morals or the rights and wrongs and beliefs of our law enforcement, our military. I mean, I've been a CIT instructor, a crisis intervention instructor, for nearly a decade now with Philadelphia PD and Camden County, and I've done a couple other things. At the end of each one, the VA rep there would tell me to go back up there and tell them what I did for a living up here, transporting, doing secure transport for cannabis, and I would have 5 or 6, like, corporal. I only trained like corporal sergeants, patrol officers, up to lieutenants, and I have at least 5 ask me if I was hiring. They're out there every day having to pick people up on that stuff. Obviously it's not. It's just another way of control, and we got to realize that restricting any of us is restricting all of us, and an attack on one of us is an attack on all of us. And I mean that in a global manner, not just for America. We're a global society. What we do here affects us there, affects me here, affects all the way around the world. So I appreciate it, guys and lady.
Thank you, council member. Yeah, I really can't add anything more that what anybody spoke to, except, not only just do that good deed, but reach across the aisle, reach across to somebody who you don't agree with, if that's the way in America, because I also agree with Councilmember Boyer. I can't see us ever getting back unless some sort of catastrophic situation necessarily brings us there, but we don't have to wait for that. We can do it by reaching across the aisle, by reaching across to those that we don't agree with, to listen to them, have discussions. That's part of the thing that we seem to lose after in 921 and 930 was tolerance for each other, accepting that we're not going to all agree. I'm not going to feel the same way as you, but I allow you and you, as you allow me, to exist and be in this country that we have here in America. So we have to accept our own responsibility in our democracy and be an active part of it. That's a big thing. You're looking at us talking, but when you call, you go speak to your representative, etc. You can represent anywhere from 5 to 1,000 people, depending on who and where you are, and use your voice for good. Help out your fellow person as best as you can, because this is how we arrive at that. We didn't talk necessarily about the Sikh community and the Islamic community that were, attacked due to 9/11. And it wasn't necessarily the best feeling for all Americans in the post 9/11 situation. And we have our responsibility of our racism there that we're still not addressing as a nation, but we'll save that for another roundtable. But needless to say, we've got a lot of work to do, but I think Diane gave us the best pointer is to, get up, do something kind and help out. And I think that's the best that we can do. So I want to thank our guests, Peter Forcelli. I hope I didn't mispronounce that. And of course, Diane Goldstein. Council members Pearson Crosby, Michael Crowitz, Richard Boyer, Ricardo Prieta, Mike, and myself, Michael Crowitz. I want to thank you all for this enlightening discussion. It was very informative, and I can't believe I get to sit down and have these wonderful conversations with you wonderful people. So you're welcome back anytime as well to join us in these conversations, as well as if you have ideas or you need us, we're here to help you. We're an all volunteer group of veterans. We're not a 501c3, so we are malleable and shapeable for any type of situation, and we're ready to do so. So thank you once again. Y'all have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll be back in 2 weeks for a V.A.C. Roundtable number 25.
Thank you guys so much. Pleasure to meet everyone. Really appreciate it. I learned so much every time I'm on with you guys.
Stay safe and